All right, hello everybody. My name is Patrick Dennis with Synaptic Advisory Partners, and today we're going to be talking about Youreka, but specifically we're going to be talking about how you can report on some of the answers that you are receiving from a Youreka form. And that doesn't matter if you have users in the field that are filling out the Youreka mobile app, filling out forms on the Youreka mobile application, or if you have users that are filling out Youreka forms inside the Salesforce desktop UI. It doesn't matter, but the question is, how do we actually report on the answers to some of these forms? And so just to paint a little bit of a picture here, we've got people that are building forms inside of the Salesforce desktop UI. You can see that on the left-hand side there. And after those forms are actually constructed and published, on the right-hand side there, you can see we have folks in the field, in this example, that are filling out surveys. And so we're going to create some reports that are going to show what some of the answers have been to these surveys. So ultimately, again, this is kind of the question that we are answering. How can we report on the responses that are recorded from on a Youreka form? And so I'm going to talk you through two ways that we can solve this challenge. The first way is using a feature that is built inside of Youreka called Form Template Stats, and that actually shows you kind of quick charts that demonstrate the answers to certain questions in a particular survey. So it's really easy to understand what responses have been for a particular template. And then also, if you want to export those responses to a CSV file, it's just a click of a button. I'll show you how to do that. And then the second way is that we can use Salesforce Reports and Dashboards to actually we'll use those features inside of Salesforce to report on some of the responses that Youreka has. So let me open up my example form template here inside of a Salesforce org. So what you can see here on the left-hand side is a form template that's actually it's inactive, so we're not using it anymore. And I want to actually just report on some of the responses. We can see that many forms have been filled out here. And I'm trying to just look at what the responses were. But just as a bit of context, and again, we'll add a link to the other video that shows this survey in its entirety. But as you can see on the right-hand side here, this would be us going through a store, answering some questions, checking on inventory for some of the products that we see. In this case, we're representing a coffee company. So we're looking at, are our products on the shelf? How many shelves are there? Are there competitive brands, etc.? So you can see there's lots of different questions that we're expected to ask. And so now let's report on some of those answers. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that first use case. So we can see in the Form Templates tab here, if we select our form template, there's actually a little gear icon in the top right-hand side, and there's a lot of different options that we can select here. The one that we're looking for the purposes of this demo, is the one that's called View Charts and Export Answers. And when I go in here, what we can see is immediately we're presented with a selector that allows us to pick from any of the different questions that we had inside of that particular store survey. And we can adjust what kinds of charts are presented, but basically what we're doing here is we're showing you the distribution of different responses to each of the questions in that survey. So it's easy to understand immediately what those responses were, but if it's of interest, we actually can export this data to a CSV format. So by simply clicking Export Data, we have the opportunity to just click on a button here, and what's happening is we are being sent an email that has our CSV file in it. And so I'm actually just going to check my email here really quick. Looks like it just came in, and it's actually just presenting us with a link that takes us right inside of Salesforce. We actually pop that CSV in as a Salesforce file for you. You can do whatever you want with it from here, but if we download this, we can easily see by opening up that file, this is what those responses look like. So it's every single question that was on the survey. We can see what those responses were, and then we can report on this any way we would like to from here. So that's an example of the first use case of using Youreka template stats to understand what the answers were for a particular survey. The second way that we can solve this and report on some of these responses would be to use Salesforce Reports and Dashboards. So as you can see here, I've got just an example dashboard here that's showing me some high-level stats that I'm interested in understanding as a manager of all these different folks that are going out to these stores and doing store visits. So you can see here we've got a lot of different stuff. How many store visits over time, what maybe the different price comparisons to our competitors. And some of this information is coming from the account object. Some of it is coming from the form object, which is added as part of the Youreka package when you install it. But some of it is also coming from the answers and questions objects inside of Salesforce. And what I mean by that is it's really helpful to understand some of the object architecture that comes with the Youreka Manage package. And so I'm not going to go into great detail, and this is not all of the objects that come with Youreka, but when you start to get an understanding as to how we're storing responses inside of Salesforce after forms are submitted, it helps you build reports inside of the system along with that object architecture. So in this case, all the different answers to the questions on a particular form are their own records inside of Salesforce. And so what that means is we can actually use report types inside of Salesforce to get us the answers that we're looking for. So in this case, maybe I want to create a brand new report. And what happens is when we just click on New Report, in this case, I'm just going to open up an Answers with Question report type. And again, it could be forms with accounts. It could be answers with questions with forms. There's a lot of different ways that we can slice the data here. But in this case, when I open up this report type, you can see these are the labels of the questions that are in the particular forms, and these are the answers for each instance. And then these are the forms that they were actually filled out on. So maybe I want to kind of drill this down and say, we're going to look for all the different questions that were inserted all time, but I only want it to be for the form template that includes store. So now this is going to take us down to just our store visit survey, and we can prove that here by just adding the form template name, and we can see there's our store visit survey. And then furthermore, what we can do is actually drill down to the question label called shelf. So let's say that we only want the question label to contain shelf, and when we do that, we can see that further we've drilled down into, are there competitive brands on the shelf? We got some yeses and we got some nos in there, but maybe what I'm looking for is shelf placement. So actually, let's drill in here even more, and we'll say shelf placement. So we'll apply that, and now we can see a distribution of, sometimes we see it's on the top shelf, sometimes we see that our products are on the middle shelf. And so let's group the rows by this field here, and now we can start to see the distribution of how often middle shelf was selected and how often top shelf was selected. Maybe we add a chart in here that demonstrates what those responses were. And so I'm going to make it a donut chart here. And we also, it looks like we had one response there where they didn't actually fill out an answer, so I'm going to filter that out, and we're going to say that I don't want the answer to be blank. So now that's gone, and it looks like now if we save and run this, we'll say shelf placement analysis, and we'll add that just to our private reports, I suppose. And when we do this, now we can open it up, we can see all the different responses. It looks like 12% of the time our products are on the lower shelf, and 20% of the time they're on the top shelf, and 68% of the time they are on the middle shelf. And then maybe I want to add this to my dashboard. We're going to add this to the store visit dashboard here. And there's all the other information that we had presented there, but now I want to actually add this donut chart here to the bottom. We'll make it nice and wide for our users. So you can see here, if we're looking for specific pieces of information from the questions and answers inside of our forms, we can present that here on Salesforce Reports and Dashboards. It's just a matter of identifying what we're interested in understanding about those forms and then building the reports inside of Salesforce that answer those questions. So this has been how we can report on answers to questions inside of a Youreka form. If you have other questions for us, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you can visit Youreka.io to learn more.